Hey everybody, it's Luca from Rackets Runners. So up until now, maybe you've seen me testing pickleball paddles or tennis rackets, and you're thinking to yourself, what the heck does this fraud know about running shoes? I've definitely been more of a court sports guy up until now, but I actually started off my R&R career as a shoe fitter, so I tested plenty of models during that time, and growing up, I actually did a lot of running as part of my soccer training. So we're going to give this a shot, a Rackets and Runners running channel, to complete the trifecta of the major sports we carry at the store. To be honest, I'm very excited. Over the past couple of months, I've been supplementing my tennis and pickleball training with cardio workouts, and it's made for a huge improvement in on-court performance and just my fitness in general. Who would have thought? Running is good for you. My major running goal for 2024 is to complete a marathon in December, so we'll see how that goes, and it also gives me a chance to test plenty of shoes along the way. So of course, it would really mean a lot to all of us at the store if you did subscribe to the channel. Please also like the video, and remember that any of the products we're going to talk about on this channel, you can check out on our website, racketsandrunners.ca, or of course in store. For today, I'm going to be reviewing the brand new Balance Hierro, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it the Hierro V8. Now, my experience with trail shoes is a little bit limited, but of course, living in Vancouver, we have plenty of fantastic trails, very easily accessible from any part of the city. So I was able to give these a pretty good go to see what they were capable of on different types of terrain. First, let's start by talking about what the Hierro line represents for New Balance. It's a trail shoe that falls somewhere in between the minimalist, responsive ones like the Fuel Cell Summit Unknown, and then the super maximalist, very cushioned ones like the More Trail. I would say in terms of the overall experience, it is a little bit closer to the More just because it does have a pretty cushioned feel to it. That's been my general experience with fresh foam versus fuel cell cushioning. There's also a lot packed in here that makes it a great road to trail shoe, which I definitely got to test out since I live in the middle of downtown. Now, compared to the previous Hierro, at first glance, they look quite similar, but there have been quite a few changes. For one, they've dropped the drop, no pun intended, by 2 millimeters from 8 mils on the V7 to 6 mils on the V8. They've also removed the gusseted tongue in favor for a more traditional, totally unattached tongue, and the upper has also gotten a little bit softer and more flexible while still maintaining the structure where it's needed. The weight has stayed pretty much identical, with this one coming in at 305 grams in a size 10 US, very similar to the previous one. Moving back to the midsole, they've also made the initial step-in feel a little bit plusher than it was on the V7, which is actually the first thing I noticed when I threw them on. Now, we'll get more into the ride later in the review because it's not just softer, end of story. It feels softer right away, but there is a more dynamic feel to the cushioning here, which becomes very important to performance. Finally, there's also been a pretty big update to the outsole, with New Balance going for this slightly more malleable, rubbery Vibram material instead of the Mega Grip one they had on the V7. They've also changed up the traction pattern, removing the sharper lugs in favor for these slightly less aggressive, smaller conical studs. That's about it for the changes. Now let's talk a little bit about the fit and comfort. In terms of length, the Hierro V8 fits true to size, and it's also quite wide. The length was perfect in my usual size 10 US, and never once did I think about going wider, and I have a pretty wide forefoot. That's kind of typical New Balance. They're known for getting a little bit wider around that 5th metatarsal, and I had plenty of room right out of the box. The rest of the shoe is also quite roomy, especially now that they've removed the gusseted tongue. I don't want to say it's a sloppy fit, but there's definitely a bit of room for your foot to move around. Logically, that means absolutely 0 pressure points, which a lot of people will like, but if you do like a slightly more aggressive locked-in sensation from your trail running shoe, there are better options out there. The cushioning goes hand in hand with the upper's comfort in that it's plush before anything else. Like I said, the midsole has gotten a little bit softer as soon as you step into the shoe. It's not super squishy like the More, but does have a bit of that pillowy sensation that makes it very forgiving on the bottom of your foot. Now, I did find there to be a little bit of arch support in the cushioning. Now, it's nothing too intense like what you'll get on the 860, but definitely more than what you'll have on a totally neutral shoe, and more than there was on the V7. I instantly felt it as I was going through my gait cycle. Because I have quite a strong arch, I don't usually want or need any arch support, and I actually felt like these were pushing me to supinate a little bit. I got used to it very quickly to the point where it was absolutely not an issue. Like I said, it's very minor, and I actually think it's going to make for an overall more positive experience because it makes for a little bit more support on uneven ground. Now, initially, I was a little bit cautious taking this shoe out to the trail because it did feel a little bit softer out of the box, and I've never been a big fan of soft shoes when the terrain isn't perfectly even. Well, that wasn't a problem with these. In fact, I was extremely extremely impressive with how sturdy they felt as soon as things got a little messy underfoot. The outsole has this unique way of splaying and neutralizing the imperfections in the ground, and then it has this little bit of extra rigidity to it when you get to the bottom of your gate, and that's how they've managed to make it feel so sturdy. That little extra rigidity is the major difference in terms of how this shoe performs on trail, because it makes for an overall less muted feel and gives a solid amount of ground feel for something otherwise so cushioned. I was really impressed. Like I said, I'm more than happy to sacrifice some plushness for a more rigid and stable feel, but never once did I find myself wobbling or unsure of how the shoe was going to respond under my foot. Also, as you would expect, that lower drop adds to the stability a little bit. Now, I will be honest, 8 to 6 millimeters isn't the biggest change, but it was noticeable on trail and didn't really detrimentally affect it on the road at all. Even the upper that I thought was going to be too soft for its own good held up extremely well. Feels like there's just the right amount of structure to it to maintain stability when necessary. Now, is it stable enough to be a hiking shoe the way New Balance claims it is? Maybe. I mean, I wouldn't take this on a trek through the Himalayas, but that's definitely not what they're implying. So I will say, I think for day hikes that are a little bit less challenging, it will be more than enough. So how does this shoe perform when you increase the pace? Well, as you would expect with the midsole being quite plush, it's not the fastest, most aggressive feeling trail shoe out there. I know I just said it has a bit of rigidity to it, but that's more so compared to the previous version. It's certainly not a firm shoe compared to the rest of the industry. It certainly won't slow you down, but it's also not going to make you feel like you got that extra little bit of zing shooting you through your stride. Also, because the upper is wider and softer, it doesn't really hug your foot, so it's not a shoe that feels sleek and fast when you're wearing it. Shoes that are made for faster pace runs tend to cocoon the foot a little bit more, not in an uncomfortable way, but in more of an aggressive, locked-in way, and you don't really have that here. It's not a shoe that I throw on my foot and think, yes, I'm going to battle with the trails today and hit a PB. It definitely has more of an easygoing sensation to it. All this means that this shoe is more geared towards longer distance or recovery runs rather than tempo or intervals. And we're going to talk about its versatility now because it complements those types of runs very well. One of the issues with more aggressive trail shoes is that they don't do particularly well on the road. The firmer nature of their outsoles means that they feel quite harsh on harder ground, and that's okay, they're meant for softer stuff, but that's where the versatility of the Hierro really shines. Now there is one change I didn't really touch on earlier that adds to this versatility, and that's New Balance adding a little bit more rocker to the forefoot here. Again, most changes are subtle, and this one is too, but it does help to propel your foot a little bit more efficiently through the gait cycle when you get into a rhythm and when the ground is even. That, along with the softer midsole and more comfortable upper, has made it just a level above the previous Hierro in terms of a well-rounded road to trail option. Now the softer compound of the Vibram outsole won't hold up forever on more abrasive surfaces, but because the traction pattern is conical instead of sharp, you won't feel such a huge drop off in traction when it does start to wear. It's really all these little tweaks that add up and make this an overall better performing shoe, not just for trail running, but also for road to trail. Now that leads us nicely into traction, which is obviously an area that's seen a lot of change coming from the previous Hierro. So I'm going to start with the good. Like I mentioned, the Vibram material they've used this time around is much softer and stickier than it was on the V7. That means that when the ground is dry, especially if you're trying to go over a rock or a root, you really feel that stickiness kick in and keep the shoe glued to the ground. Now, I thought that would also mean it performs worse in the wet because sticky can quickly become slick with moisture, but I didn't have any issues with that. Where this outsole won't be quite as good is in the really muddy, steep sections. The conical tread isn't as aggressive as the previous one, and it's definitely less aggressive than your average trail shoes. It doesn't dig into the ground as well, but it's by no means bad, and what these rounder studs do give you is a bit more maneuverability to pivot when you are planted in the ground. That's definitely not a bad thing. Too aggressive of a pattern can lead to injury if you're not ready for it, and I think that complements the rest of the shoe's more toned down nature quite well. You're not trying to bulldoze through the earth here, you're taking things a little more slowly, a little more comfortably. It's still plenty of grip, but it's more of a natural feeling traction than something too aggressive. That's the name of the game with this shoe. Natural, not aggressive. A real workhorse shoe, if you will, and its comfort was the most outstanding thing throughout my runs. I think it's a great update on the previous one. It's gotten both better for trail and for the road, so I'll happily keep it in my rotation as I embark on my marathon journey. With that said, that is going to be the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, if you do want to try on any of the shoes we talk about here, you can come visit us in store, or you can check them out online at racketsandrunners.ca.